first time Michael Donovan noticed something was off about his new neighbor was when she complained about the birds in his yard being too loud. Not his birds, just wild birds that happened to prefer his oak trees to hers. The second red flag came when she demanded he trim his hedges 2 inches shorter because they were blocking her view off his driveway. But nothing could have prepared him for the absolute circus that would unfold over his backyard swimming pool. It was a sweltering July afternoon when Michael finally decided the aging above-ground pool had to go. He purchased the modest 2-bedroom ranch-style home in Millfield 6 months earlier, inheriting the decade-old pool from the previous owners. The liner was cracked beyond repair, the pump made concerning noises on the rare occasions it worked at all, and the whole structure had become an eyesore that took up valuable backyard space. "Time to reclaim my yard," Michael muttered as he surveyed the faded blue monstrosity from his back porch, cold lemonade in hand. At 36, recently divorced and starting over in a new neighborhood, the pool removal symbolized something deeper, shedding the past and creating space for whatever came next. He'd already drained the pool weeks ago, following proper procedures and local regulations. This weekend would be demolition day. Michael had researched the process thoroughly, obtained the necessary permits, and even hired his buddy Jake, who owned a small landscaping business, to help with the heavy lifting and proper disposal of materials. What he hadn't factored into his carefully laid plans was Karen Winters, the 50-something woman who had moved into the house behind his just 3 months ago. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather for the project. Jake pulled into the driveway at 8 a.m. sharp in his pickup truck loaded with tools. "Ready to say goodbye to this beast?" Jake asked, slapping Michael on the shoulder as they walked to the backyard. "More than ready," Michael replied. "Let's get started." They were barely an hour into disassembling the aluminum frame when a shrill voice cut through the air. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" Michael turned to see Karen Winters standing at the edge of his property, arms crossed tightly over her floral blouse, her blonde bob haircut practically vibrating with indignation. Even from a distance, he could see her narrowed eyes darting between him, Jake, and the partially dismantled pool. "Good morning, Mrs. Winters," Michael called, trying to keep his tone friendly. "Just removing this old pool. Should be done by tomorrow." Karen marched closer, her face reddening with each step. "You can't do that. That pool is a neighborhood fixture. We all enjoy seeing it from our windows." Michael exchanged a confused glance with Jake before responding. "I'm sorry, but it's my pool on my property, and it hasn't even held water in months." "Well, I never approved this," she snapped as if her approval was somehow required. "It decreases my property value. I have friends coming over next weekend, and I promised them a view of a pool." Michael blinked, momentarily speechless. Was she serious? His broken, empty pool that was barely visible from her back windows. "The permits are all in order," he finally said, trying to remain calm. "I'm well within my rights to remove it." Karen's eyes narrowed to slits. "We'll see about that," she hissed, pulling out her phone. "The neighborhood association will hear about this, and so will the police." As she stormed back toward her house, jabbing furiously at her phone screen, Michael turned to Jake with a bewildered expression. "Did she just threaten to call the cops because I'm removing my own pool?" Jake chuckled, shaking his head. "Buddy, I think you've got yourself a classic Karen situation. This is gonna get interesting." Michael had no idea just how prophetic those words would prove to be. Michael and Jake continued working, the rhythmic clangs of metal and occasional whir of power tools filling the summer air. They had managed to dismantle about half of the pool structure when the unmistakable sound of sirens approached, growing louder until they stopped right outside Michael's house. "You got to be kidding me," Michael muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "She actually called the cops." Jake set down his wrench. "Want me to handle this? I deal with permit questions all the time." Before Michael could answer, 2 police officers, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a younger woman with her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, appeared at the side gate. Karen Winters trailed behind them, her expression a mixture of smugness and manufactured concern. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," Karen exclaimed, gesturing dramatically toward the pool. "They're destroying community property without authorization." The older officer, whose name badge read Rodriguez, looked from Karen to Michael with a weary expression that suggested this wasn't his first neighborhood dispute. "Good morning, sir. We received a call about unauthorized demolition work." Officer Rodriguez's tone made it clear he was already suspecting this was a waste of department resources. Michael stepped forward, trying to keep his frustration in check. "Officers, this is my property and my pool. I have all the necessary permits." He gestured toward a folder on the patio table. "Everything's in order." The younger officer, Adams, picked up the folder and began examining the paperwork while Rodriguez surveyed the scene. "The pool is a neighborhood amenity," Karen interjected. "It's visible from multiple properties and removes it constitutes vandalism of our shared visual landscape." Officer Adams raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, that's not how property law works. Check the Homeowners Association bylaws, Karen insisted, pulling out a crumpled printout from her purse. Section 7.3 clearly states that major alterations to backyard structures visible to neighboring properties require committee approval. Michael hadn't actually read all the HOA bylaws yet, and for a moment doubt crept in. Was there really such a provision? He'd only requested city permits, assuming that would be sufficient. Officer Rodriguez took the paper from Karen, scanned it briefly, and handed it back. Ma'am, this document appears to be from the Willow Creek HOA. Is that correct? Of course. We all live under their jurisdiction, Karen replied confidently. Michael and Jake exchanged confused glances. Actually, Michael said slowly, this is the Pine Ridge neighborhood. Willow Creek is across town. Karen's face flushed. That can't be right. This is Willow Creek. Officer Adams, who had finished reviewing Michael's permits, rejoined the conversation. All these city permits are in order for this address, which is definitely in Pine Ridge, not Willow Creek. Furthermore, Michael added, finding his confidence, Pine Ridge doesn't even have an active HOA. It dissolved 3 years ago, according to the previous homeowner. Karen's mouth opened and closed several times, her certainty visibly crumbling. But rather than retreat, she doubled down. Well, it doesn't matter. He's creating a hazardous construction site. There are safety violations everywhere. She pointed frantically at the dismantled pool parts. Children could wander in and get hurt, and the noise is disrupting the entire neighborhood. As if on cue, Michael's next-door neighbor, Mrs. Patel, an elderly woman who had lived in the neighborhood for decades, appeared at her fence. Is everything all right, Michael? She called. We heard sirens. Everything's fine, Mrs. Patel, Michael reassured her. Just a misunderstanding. Oh, good, she replied, then noticed Karen. Her warm smile cooled significantly. Is she causing trouble again? She tried to have my grandson's birthday party shut down last month for excessive celebration noise. The boy turned 7. Officer Rodriguez sighed deeply, clearly having reached his conclusion about the situation. He turned to Karen. Ma'am, there are no violations here. Mr. Donovan has the proper permits, this is his property, and he's well within his rights to remove his own pool. But, Karen began. Furthermore, he continued firmly, misusing emergency services for a non-emergency situation like this is actually an offense. I'm giving you a warning this time, but if it happens again, there will be consequences. Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red as she realized the tables had completely turned. With a final glare at Michael, she stormed off toward her house, phone already pressed to her ear, undoubtedly seeking another authority to appeal to. The officers apologized to Michael for the disturbance and wished him luck with his project before departing. As their patrol car pulled away, Jake clapped Michael on the shoulder. Man, I'd say that's the end of it, but something tells me Karen isn't done yet. Michael watched Karen pacing on her back porch, gesticulating wildly into her phone. No, he agreed grimly. This is just the beginning. By Sunday afternoon, Michael and Jake had made substantial progress. The pool was completely dismantled, with the metal frame and liner neatly sorted into piles for recycling and disposal. They were now working on filling in the slight depression left behind, planning to finish with fresh sod for a seamless lawn. Hand me that rake, would you? Michael asked, surveying their work with satisfaction. Despite Karen's interruption the day before, they were ahead of schedule. Jake tossed in the rake and took a long drink from his water bottle. You know what's weird? I haven't seen Hurricane Karen all day, not even peering through her curtains. Michael glanced toward Karen's house. It was unusually quiet. Maybe she finally realized she has no ground to stand on. Or maybe she's plotting something bigger, Jake suggested with a laugh. As it turned out, Jake's instincts were correct. The temporary peace was shattered late Sunday afternoon when a black SUV with Millfield County Code Enforcement emblazoned on its side pulled up in front of Michael's house. A tall man in khakis and a polo shirt approached the backyard, clipboard in hand. Afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Dennis Wilcox from County Code Enforcement. I need to speak with the homeowner. Michael stepped forward, wiping his dirty hands on his jeans. That would be me, Michael Donovan. Mr. Donovan, I've received an urgent complaint about unauthorized excavation work being conducted without proper environmental assessment. The complainant alleges you're creating a sinkhole risk and potentially contaminating the water table. His tone was professional but skeptical, as if he was simply going through required motions. A sinkhole risk? From removing an above-ground pool? Michael couldn't keep the incredulity from his voice. Dennis sighed. The complaint was detailed, something about improper soil disruption and drainage issues. I'm required to investigate all reports, no matter how unlikely they seem. From over the fence, they heard a distinct rustling. Karen was not even trying to hide the fact that she was eavesdropping, her blonde head visible above the fence line as she pretended to trim a bush that clearly didn't need trimming. Would you like to see my permits? Michael asked Dennis. The officers who came by yesterday already verified them. Officers? Dennis raised an eyebrow. This has already involved the police? As Michael explained the previous day's events, Dennis' expression shifted from professional neutrality to poorly concealed amusement. He reviewed the permits, walked around the yard taking a few perfunctory notes, and then closed his clipboard. Everything appears to be in order, Mr. Donovan. You're actually doing exemplary work here. Better than most homeowners who attempt DIY projects of this scale. From over the fence came an indignant huff. Karen had abandoned all pretense of gardening and was now openly glaring at them. This is outrageous, she called out. He's definitely violating some code. What about noise ordinances? What about dust control? What about... Ma'am, Dennis cut in firmly. Are you the one who filed this complaint? Karen lifted her chin defiantly. Someone had to take action. He's destroying neighborhood property values with his reckless demolition. Dennis turned to face her directly. Ms. Winters. Karen Winters, she supplied, clearly pleased to have his attention. Ms. Winters, filing false reports with code enforcement is a serious matter. It ties up county resources that could be addressing genuine safety concerns. Karen's satisfied expression faltered. It's not false. Look at all that dirt. And those tools. It's hazardous. Dennis maintained his professional demeanor, but Michael could see he was struggling not to roll his eyes. Ms. Winters, Mr. Donovan has all the proper permits and is conducting this work well within code guidelines. Furthermore, this is his third interaction with local authorities due to your complaints, all of which have been determined to be unfounded. But, Karen began. Additionally, Dennis continued, I should inform you that repeated unfounded complaints can be considered harassment, and the county can assess fines for frivolous reports. Karen's face reddened. Are you threatening me? I'm a taxpayer. I pay your salary. Dennis simply made a note on his clipboard. Have a pleasant Sunday, Ms. Winters. He turned back to Michael. Mr. Donovan, you're clear to continue. Everything looks good here. As Dennis walked back to his vehicle, Karen slammed her gardening shears down on her patio table hard enough to make Michael wince. This isn't over, Donovan, she shouted. I'm calling the mayor. I'm calling the EPA. I know people in high places. Michael and Jake exchanged glances, both too exhausted to find her threats amusing anymore. You know what? Michael called back, his patience finally evaporating. Please do call them all. And while you're at it, maybe mention how you've been photographing my backyard without permission. Karen's eyes widened. I have not. Michael pulled out his phone and held it up. My security camera says otherwise. 7 different occasions in the past 3 days. I wasn't going to mention it, but since you're so concerned about violations. It was a bluff. His security camera didn't actually cover that angle of the yard, but Karen's suddenly panicked expression told him he'd struck gold. That's invasion of privacy, she spluttered. You can't record me without consent. Actually, in this state, you can record anything visible from your own property, Jake chimed in, having dealt with similar issues in his landscaping business, especially when it involves someone trespassing or harassing you. Karen's mouth opened and closed several times, resembling a fish out of water. Without another word, she retreated into her house, slamming the door behind her. Think that'll buy us some peace? Jake asked, hopefully. Michael shook his head. Honestly, I think we just made it worse. As if to confirm his prediction, a watched through Karen's kitchen window as she paced back and forth, phone pressed to her ear, gesticulating wildly. Whoever was on the receiving end of that call was in for quite a story. Michael turned back to the yard. Let's just finish this up as quickly as possible. What neither of them realized was that Karen's next move would escalate their neighborhood dispute far beyond anything they could have imagined. Monday morning dawned bright and clear. Michael had taken the day off work to finish the yard restoration, determined to complete the project before Karen could devise any new interference tactics. Jake had another job scheduled but promised to stop by later to help with the final touches. Michael was laying the last section of sod when he heard a car pull into his driveway. His heart sank, expecting another official summoned by Karen's relentless complaints. Instead, he was surprised to see Mrs. Patel making her way around the side of the house, carrying a tray covered with a checkered cloth. Good morning, Michael, she called cheerfully. I brought you some homemade samosas and chai. You've been working so hard all weekend. Michael set down his tools and gratefully accepted the offering. Mrs. Patel, you're an angel. Thank you. It's the least I can do. Everyone on the block is happy to see that eyesore gone. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. And we've all had our run-ins with that woman. Did you know she tried to have my rose bushes removed because she claimed they attracted too many bees to the neighborhood? Michael laughed. Somehow that doesn't surprise me. Mrs. Patel glanced over at Karen's house. It's been quiet over there this morning. Usually she's out by 9 inspecting everyone's lawns for violations. Maybe she finally gave up, Michael suggested hopefully, though he didn't believe it for a second. Mrs. Patel patted his arm. Just be careful, dear. People like her don't give up. They just change strategies. After Mrs. Patel left, Michael continued working, energized by the food and neighborly support. By early afternoon, the yard looked transformed. Where the pool had once dominated the space, there was now a smooth green lawn. Michael had even started marking out where he planned to build a small patio and fire pit later in the summer. He was so absorbed in his work that he didn't notice the unmarked white van that pulled up across the street or the man with a camera who emerged from it. It wasn't until he heard Karen's triumphant voice that he realized something was happening. "Over here, Bill. Get all of this on camera. I want everything documented." Michael looked up to see Karen leading a middle-aged man in a rumpled suit toward his yard. The man had a professional camera and was filming as they approached. "Mrs. Winters, could you explain again what we're looking at here?" The man asked in a broadcaster's polished tone. Karen's entire demeanor had transformed. Gone was the shrieking neighbor. In her place stood a composed, concerned citizen performing for the camera. "As you can see, Bill, this homeowner has completely destroyed a beautiful backyard pool that has been a neighborhood fixture for years. Multiple complaints have been filed with various authorities, but the demolition continued unchecked." Michael set down his rake and approached them. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" The man extended his hand. "Bill Larson, Channel 8 News. We're doing a segment on homeowner rights and neighborhood disputes. Mrs. Winters contacted our tip line with a compelling story about community landmarks being destroyed without neighborhood input." Michael stared in disbelief. "She called a news station? About me removing my own pool?" Karen smiled sweetly for the camera. "It's not just about a pool, Bill. It's about the erosion of neighborhood character and property values. This kind of unilateral decision-making affects us all." Bill turned to Michael. "Would you care to comment for our story, Mr. Donovan, Michael Donovan?" "And yes, I absolutely would like to comment." Michael took a deep breath, determined to remain calm despite his rising anger. "This beautiful pool was a decrepit, non-functioning eyesore that I've removed from my private property with all proper permits and approvals." Karen cut in. The aesthetic value transcended its functionality. It was a landmark visible from multiple properties. "It was a rusted above-ground pool with a torn liner that hadn't held water in years," Michael countered. He turned to Bill. "Did Mrs. Winters mention that she's already called the police and code enforcement about this, and both confirmed I'm well within my rights?" Bill's journalistic interest visibly shifted. "Is that so?" "She mentioned there had been institutional resistance to addressing the issue." "That's one way of putting it," Michael said dryly. "Another way is that multiple officials have told her she has no case because this is my property and my decision." Karen's camera-ready composure began to crack. "They don't understand the community impact, the visual pollution, the noise." "Visual pollution." Michael gestured to the now smooth lawn. "I've improved both my property and neighborhood values by removing an eyesore and creating usable green space. Perhaps we should interview some other neighbors for perspective," Bill suggested, clearly realizing the story wasn't what Karen had presented it to be. "Excellent idea," Michael agreed, spotting Mrs. Patel watering her garden. "Mrs. Patel has lived here for 20 years. I'm sure she can provide some neighborhood context." Karen's face paled. "That won't be necessary. This is between me and him." But Bill was already heading toward Mrs. Patel, camera in hand. Karen hurried after him, attempting to redirect his attention, but it was too late. Over the next 15 minutes, Bill interviewed not only Mrs. Patel, but 3 other neighbors who had emerged from their homes, curious about the news van. One by one, they expressed support for Michael's pool removal and, unprompted, shared their own stories of Karen's overbearing behavior since moving to the neighborhood. "She reported my son's treehouse as an unauthorized structure," one neighbor revealed. "She called animal control because my cat was sitting on my own front porch," said another. As the testimonials mounted, Karen's feigned composure completely collapsed. Her face reddened and her voice rose to the shrill pitch Michael had come to know all too well. "They're all against me. This is a conspiracy. You're not getting the real story." Bill Larson, seasoned reporter that he was, recognized good television when he saw it. He kept the camera rolling as Karen's public meltdown intensified. "This isn't about a pool at all, is it, Mrs. Winters?" he asked calmly. "Of course it is. It's about neighborhood standards. It's about property values. It seems to be about control," Bill suggested. "About imposing your preferences on others' private property." That was the breaking point. Karen jabbed a finger toward the camera. "You're twisting everything. This interview is over. Delete that footage immediately." She made a grab for the camera, but Bill smoothly stepped back. "Mrs. Winters, please don't touch our equipment. I'll sue you all." Karen shrieked, abandoning all pretense of being a reasonable, concerned citizen. "Every one of you." The homeowners association will hear about this. We don't have an MOA, and multiple neighbors reminded her simultaneously. Karen let out a wordless sound of frustration and stormed off toward her house, pausing only to turn back and shout, "This isn't over, Donovan." As the neighborhood watched her retreat, Bill turned to Michael with an amused expression. "Mr. Donovan, I think we have enough for our segment, but it's going to be quite different from what Mrs. Winters envisioned. Would you be willing to do a formal interview about neighborly disputes and property rights?" Michael looked around at his supportive neighbors, then back at his beautifully restored yard. "Actually, yes. I think that's a conversation worth having." As Bill set up for the interview, Michael couldn't help but glance toward Karen's house, where all the curtains had been dramatically drawn shut. Yet a feeling the story was about to take yet another unexpected turn. The Channel 8 news segment aired on Wednesday evening. Titled Property Rights and Neighborly Etiquette, it featured Michael explaining the pool removal process, interviews with multiple neighbors, and expert commentary from a local real estate attorney. Karen appeared in several clips, each less flattering than the last, culminating in her attempted grab for the camera. By Thursday morning, the segment had gone viral on local social media. Michael's phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends who had seen it. Even his ex-wife texted, "Saw you on the news. Glad to see you're making friends in the new neighborhood." 3 days had passed since the news crew's visit, and there had been no sign of Karen. Her car came and went, but the curtains remained drawn, and not once had she emerged to patrol the neighborhood for violations. The unexpected peace was almost unsettling. "Maybe she's finally given up," Jake suggested as he and Michael enjoyed beers on the newly installed patio furniture in Michael's transformed backyard. The fire pit was coming along nicely, with a stack of pavers ready to complete the project over the weekend. Michael shook his head. "I don't know. Mrs. Patel said she saw a moving truck outside Karen's house yesterday. Large one, too." "No way. You scared her out of the neighborhood." Jake raised his bottle in a toast. "The pool saga ends in total victory." "Let's not celebrate too soon," Michael cautioned. "For all we know, she's moving in more surveillance equipment." Their speculation was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into Michael's driveway. Both men turned to see a sleek black Tesla stopping behind Michael's modest sedan. "Expecting company?" Jake asked. "No," Michael replied, standing to see who it was. A tall man in an expensive suit emerged from the Tesla. He appeared to be in his early 60s, with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge. He surveyed the house briefly before making his way around to the backyard. Michael and Jake exchanged concerned glances. Was this another official? A lawyer? Karen's final offensive? "Michael Donovan," the man called as he approached the patio. "That's me," Michael replied cautiously. The man extended his hand. "Richard Winters. I believe you've had the misfortune of meeting my wife, Karen." Michael nearly choked on his beer. This was Karen's husband? He shook the offered hand, trying to mask his surprise. "Mr. Winters, yes, your wife and I have interacted." Richard Winters smiled ruefully. "First, I want to apologize for my wife's behavior. I spent the past 2 days dealing with the fallout from that news segment, and I've heard all about the pool situation from multiple perspectives." "I appreciate that," Michael said carefully, still wary. "Would you like to sit down?" Richard nodded and took a seat at the patio table. "I travel frequently for work. I'm a corporate consultant. I was in Singapore when all this happened. Landed yesterday to find my wife in a state and our neighborhood reputation in shambles." Jake, sensing the conversation might be headed into personal territory, excused himself to check on the pavers, though he remained within earshot. "Mr. Winters," Michael began. "Richard, please." "Richard, I want you to know I never intended for things to escalate the way they did. I was just trying to remove an old pool and improve my property." Richard waved away the explanation. "You don't need to justify yourself. You are completely within your rights. Karen has, well, she's always been particular about things, but since we moved here, it's gotten out of hand." He gazed around the backyard approvingly. "I must say you've done a beautiful job with this space. Much better than that eyesore of a pool." Michael's wariness began to fade. "Thank you. That means a lot after everything that's happened." "The truth is," Richard continued, lowering his voice slightly, "Karen isn't well. She's been under tremendous stress from some family matters, and she's developed this fixation on controlling our environment. The move was supposed to be a fresh start, but he trailed off looking genuinely troubled." "I'm sorry to hear that," Michael said, and he meant it. Despite everything, he felt a twinge of sympathy. Richard straightened his shoulders. "After the news segment aired, I finally convinced her to see someone. She's starting therapy next week, and we're moving." "Moving?" Michael couldn't hide his surprise because of the pool thing. Richard chuckled. "No, though that certainly accelerated our timeline. I've actually been offered a position that will keep me in the country more, in Charlotte. We were planning to move within 6 months anyway. I see, Michael said, processing this unexpected turn of events. The real reason I came, Richard continued, reaching into his jacket pocket, was to give you this. He handed Michael an envelope. Michael opened it cautiously to find a handwritten note and a check for a substantial amount. Karen would never apologize herself, at least not yet, but this is her way of acknowledging the situation. The note is from her, dictated to me but signed by her hand, and the check is to cover any expenses or inconvenience our one-sided neighborhood war might have caused. Michael stared at the check, then at the note, which read simply, Mr. Donovan, I regret my actions regarding your pool removal. The enclosed amount is compensation for any distress caused. Karen Winters. This is unexpected, Michael finally said, and unnecessary. I don't need financial compensation. Richard held up a hand. Please accept it. If not for yourself, then donate it to the neighborhood association, or wait, there isn't one, is there? He smiled wryly. Perhaps a neighborhood block party then. Something to bring people together rather than drive them apart. The idea appealed to Michael. A block party is actually a great idea. This new patio space would be perfect for hosting something like that. Richard stood, extending his hand once more. I'm glad we could end this on a better note. We'll be moved out by the end of next week. I already apologized to your other neighbors, particularly Mrs. Patel, who was gracious enough to accept a replacement rose bush. As they shook hands, Michael felt the tension of the past week finally beginning to dissolve. I wish you and Karen all the best in Charlotte. I hope things improve for her. Thank you. So do I, Richard glanced around the yard one more time. You know, in a strange way, Karen was right about one thing. This yard really is visible from multiple properties. You created something beautiful here that everyone can appreciate, just not in the way she thought. After Richard left, Jake emerged from his strategic distance by the pavers. Did that just happen? Did Karen's husband just apologize and give you a check? Michael nodded, still processing the unexpected resolution. He seems like a decent guy. Makes you wonder how they ended up together. So that's it. The Karen saga is over. Jake looked almost disappointed that the drama had concluded so anticlimactically. Looks that way, Michael confirmed, though I'm keeping my security cameras on until they're completely moved out, just in case. Jake laughed and picked up his beer. Smart man. So what are you going to do with the money? Michael looked around his transformed backyard, thinking of Mrs. Patel and the other neighbors who had supported him through Karen's crusade. I'm going to throw the best damn block party this neighborhood has ever seen. And he did 3 weeks later, once the Winters had moved out and the fire pit was completed. Every neighbor on the block attended, bringing dishes and drinks to share. Mrs. Patel's samosas were the hit of the party. The yard that had once been dominated by a decrepit pool became the neighborhood gathering spot, filled with laughter and new friendships. Sometimes in the years that followed, when neighbors would compliment Michael on his beautiful yard, he would smile and say, you know, I have Karen to thank for this. And he would tell the story of the woman who tried to get him arrested for removing his own pool, and how it didn't end well for her, but ended perfectly for everyone else. In an unexpected epilogue, the Channel 8 news segment won Bill Larson a local Emmy for community reporting. In his acceptance speech, he thanked the unforgettable Karen, wherever she may be, for providing television gold. And somewhere in Charlotte, North Carolina, a woman watching the broadcast on her phone turned it off with a huff and went to her therapy appointment, determined to never become viral news again.